howdy from Manila, Philippines, where it is currently 10:04 p.m. Very excited to be here today to talk about our next in our three-part series on cyber defense. A little bit about me. I'm currently the Director of Cyber Monitoring and Incident Response at DTCC. I have about 15 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity. I've also got a lot of experience in emergency management as a former firefighter, and part of what we're going to talk about today is how I've combined some of that experience as a firefighter in with cybersecurity and doing incident response, and how there's some parallels there that we can draw upon. So just to get started, that's my LinkedIn down at the bottom. Please feel free to add me. Happy to network with anybody if you have questions, if you have comments, if you implement any of the things that we talk about. Would love to hear about it, and please stay in touch. So with that, we're going to dive right in. All right, so I'm going to reference some of that first webinar that I gave, but I'm also going to try to do a good job of rehashing it as well, so that for those of you who did not watch the first webinar, you'll still understand where we're at. So our key takeaways today, we're going to talk about the key fundamentals of what makes up a security operations center. We're going to talk about the techniques for ensuring that we have effective monitoring and incident response in place in that security operations center. We're going to talk about how we can integrate vulnerability and exposure management, which is a little different than the normal security incident response. We're going to talk about what we can do during an incident to ensure that we're effective and ensure that our response and recovery are as effective as possible. And we're going to talk about how we can develop an exercise program and continuous improvement program to ensure that our SOC is constantly maturing and growing. All right, so moving right along, let's talk about what the mission of a SOC is. This is the part where, if this was not a webinar, I would say, who can tell me what the mission of a SOC is? The mission of the Security Operations Center is to detect, investigate, respond, remediate, and report. So what do we mean by that? The detect piece is detecting cybersecurity incidents. This is where we monitor the network for signs of intrusion, signs of malicious activity, etc. Investigate, this is where an analyst will then take those detections, look into it further, determine whether or not they are true or whether they're explained by some other behavior. In the event that it is a true positive and it's malicious activity, we then have to respond. So bringing together the proper groups to be able to take action against whatever this malicious activity is. Remediate is where we then make changes to improve the environment, lock the environment down to prevent the attack from continuing. And then reporting is obviously the most important thing to the rest of our organization, which is telling our stakeholders, our senior leaders what happened, and telling them the current status of the organization from a cybersecurity perspective. So very exciting stuff, but also very high stakes in the Security Operations Center. So understanding the mission of the SOC, we can go into a little bit more in terms of fundamental components. So kind of going back to that mission, our fundamental components, we have a mission for monitoring and alerting, where again, we're looking for security events. This is where we're going to bring events into like a SIM tool or something else to be able to aggregate them and fire when suspicious activity happens. Investigation and forensics. So that's where you bring in additional log sources, you bring in investigators, you may gather forensic artifacts at that time to do some analysis to exactly what's happening. Incident response. So in the event that we have to do something about what we see. QA, QC, and QI, so quality assurance, quality control, and quality improvement. This is your continuous improvement program where what our analysts are doing, looking what your incident responders are doing to make sure that we're following our plans, policies, and procedures, our training is adequate, our plans, policies, and procedures are adequate, etc. And then training and exercises. So this is where we're practicing what we're doing. This is where we're upskilling and ensuring that our analysts know what they're doing and that they stay current with current events. Some other things that can be included within a security operations center in terms of programs might be an insider threat program, looking specifically at employee behavior. So instead of attackers seeing us from the outside, it's employees who may be doing things that they shouldn't. Data loss prevention. So things like ensuring that data is not sent outside the organization when it shouldn't be. Things like that we're controlling, tagging and cataloging our data so that we know where our sensitive data lives and we are applying proper controls. And then cyber threat intelligence. So this is bringing in threat intelligence feeds as well as potentially sharing threat intelligence out to the community through things like ISACs and stuff like that. These are optional. Sometimes they're included as part of the SOC. Sometimes they're separate. Another one I didn't put here is threat hunting. Again, that's kind of an investigation on steroids, but it's very similar to the investigation and forensics portion. It's just going to typically be conducted over a longer period of time. So these are our fundamental components of the SOC. This is kind of how the SOC operates from a programmatic perspective. Let's talk about monitoring incident response techniques, which is probably why most of y'all are here. So two components to how the SOC operates. During your day-to-day, when alerts are coming in to your SIM tool or your alerting queue, you're following a tiered model of investigation. So typically it's level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is going to be triage. So that's where we take a look at the alerts that are coming in. Oftentimes we categorize the alerts by criticality, high, medium, low, critical, as well as do some initial investigation to make sure they're not some sort of false positive. At that triage level, that's typically where we're going to look at all the alerts coming in. We oftentimes have multiple alerts coming in at the same time. We only have so many analysts available to investigate them. So we perform a triage to determine which ones are going to be investigated first. Typically, we go with the highest criticality and then work our way down and try to clear the queue out. That level 2 is going to be that initial investigation. So this is where your SOC analyst is going to jump into the alert, take a look at what's going on, and try to determine whether or not this is malicious activity. And then in the event that either they cannot determine that or they think it is malicious activity, it'll typically be escalated to like a level 3, which is where a team lead or a level 3 analyst may look at it, or an incident responder may get involved and we may declare a cyber incident. This allows us to investigate multiple alerts in parallel. So again, different alerts are firing throughout the day, coming into the SOC, being triaged and assigned out. On the other hand, when we have an incident and we say, okay, we have a real intrusion and there's something that we need to do about it, typically instead of having a distributed system where we're having lots of things happen in parallel, we're going to bring that into an incident command system view, where we're going to have a single incident commander who kind of runs the show. They're going to set some objectives and perform what's called management by objectives. This is where the first responder part of me comes out, where we're going to do management by objectives. We're going to set objectives for the incident and say, these are the things that we need to do. Then we're going to divide up into subgroups to carry out specific tasks. So you'll typically bring in other people, other teams. Think your IT teams, think potentially human resources, legal, maybe outside vendors, etc. You're going to organize those groups so that they're all following the same objectives set by the incident commander, and the goal being to stop the attack and then start mitigating. The incident command system also has some mechanisms for providing situational awareness at regular checkpoints. If you're interested in the incident command system, you can actually Google incident command system. There's a lot of training out there online through like Department of Homeland Security and other things, where this is taught to firefighters, police, EMS, emergency managers, etc. But we can leverage the same concepts within cybersecurity. because it's kind of a similar issue. All right, so oops, my apologies. Let's talk about the investigation lifecycle. So we talked a little bit about incident response. Let's go back to that investigation situation. So we go to our 3-tiered model. We have an event occurs in the actual environment. So what that means is something happens. Logs are produced and shipped to our log management system, our SIM tool, what have you. And then based on that, due to an event or a series of events, an alert will fire in the SIM. This is the first sign that a human needs to get involved in what's happening. Maybe a single event has occurred or a series of events have reached a certain threshold to fire an alert. The alert's triage based on the criticality. So again, we go to our 3-tiered model. Typically, you're going to have someone going through and doing triage and assigning out the tickets. An analyst is going to do some basic investigations. First, to rule out false positives, so I'm getting the alert fired for activity that's not malicious, or the alert fired at a time it should not have fired. The next step is what we call enrichment, where we pull in additional information. So the alert may tell us that a certain threshold of login failures occurred on a system. And we say, okay, that's a potential problem. Great. I'm going to look at the system, and as an analyst, I'm going to say, okay, who's trying to log in? Great. Tell me all the other activity from that user who's been logging in. Oh, well, we see after several failures, we see a successful login from a geographic where they normally log in from. Okay, location that's different. That's a clue. Then we see that after they're logged in, they're accessing some things that they don't normally access. Again, that's a clue. We're going to bring all that together in what we call enrichment through looking at other log sources, kind of pulling on the threads of the investigation to find out what's happening. At that point, if we say, okay, this is potentially malicious, or we deem it is definitely malicious, then we're going to escalate, and if necessary, declare an incident. Typically, what declaring an incident means is it gives the incident response team certain powers to do certain things quick, fast, and in a hurry, which is really important to being able to stay ahead of the adversary. So, ways we can ensure effective investigations and response within our organization. We're going to talk about metrics a little bit. This is not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's important to measure. So we're going to look at key metrics. We want to report key metrics to our stakeholders, to our senior management, to ourselves, to our team, to see what's going on and understand how we're progressing, and see changes that are made. So when a new tool is deployed, does it change our key metrics? Does it increase or decrease our speed, and things of that nature? The other big thing is, over time, you want to be able to improve those metrics. These are cyclical. So as we start firing new or creating new content, things like that, typically the amount of false positives you're going to get is going to start to go up. Then you're going to tune those alerts and get them better, and then your false positive rate's going to go back down. And that's a normal cyclical process within the SOC. So some key metrics that we look at, MTTR is above all the main one, the mean time to resolve, the total life cycle of the event, from the event firing to how long until we close the ticket all the way out. This gives you a really good idea of your SOC efficiency overall. You can break it down by criticality, or you can look at the aggregate. I typically look at the aggregate. The other one is MTTA, so mean time to acknowledge or mean time to action. How long does an alert stay in that triage queue before an analyst is able to pick it up? For critical alerts, you want that number to be very, very low. For lower alerts, you still want it to be low, but it's okay if it's a little bit longer. Time to contain. This is time from the initial access to the time that we stopped the bad guys, to the time we were able to contain the threat actor and prevent them from moving any further. This is a little bit different than mean time to resolve. Resolve requires pulling forensics, understanding exactly what occurred, recovering all affected systems, where the time to contain is just how quickly until we stop the bad guy from progressing. we want to look at is our SIM quality. So our SIM is the place where all the alerts happen. So we care about the quality of the SIM and the information in it. So our false positive percentage, what is the ratio of true positive to false positive alerts? If my ratio of true positive to false positive alerts is 1 to 100, that's concerning. So for every 1 true positive alert my team is working, they have to work 100 false positive alerts. That's very noisy. You want to get that ratio lower. Event to alert time. So this is the time between the event actually occurring in the environment and the SIM actually firing. There is a lag time. It is usually acceptable to be anywhere between 5 minutes and 15 minutes, depending on the system. Some cloud logs take a long time to come down into the SIM, things like that. But if that time starts to shoot up and you have hours between the event occurring in the environment and the alert firing in the SIM, that's a problem. And that's something that you want to investigate. Log source coverage is also really important. Is the SIM consuming all the security relevant logs? So do I have all my security tools set up so that they're reporting into the SIM? Or are there large coverage gaps where there's parts of my environment that the SIM does not fire alerts on? That is something that you constantly want to measure on a regular basis, again, because you're putting a lot of faith into that SIM tool. And then finally, the quality of the investigation. This is your QA program again. So percentage of case records closed with proper procedures notes. This is, are your people following your procedures? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Are they checking all the things that they're supposed to check? Gotcha. And did I get to quality? I think that's where I cut out. All right, we'll just assume that I stopped off at quality of investigations. So again, this is our QA program. This is where we want to look at our percentage of case records closed with proper procedures and notes, saying our people are following our procedures. They're checking all the things that they're supposed to check before they, declare a case record as closed or what have you. Oh, we lost. False positive rate was the last place. Man, I was talking for a while. My apologies, folks. Let's go back. So SIM quality, our false positive rate, ratio of true positive to false positive alerts. We want that ratio to be low. If my team is working a false positive rate of 1 to 100, meaning for every 1 true positive alert that they investigate, they have to investigate 100 false positive alerts. That's a problem. That's a noisy SIM. We want to get that lower. Event to alert time. This is the time between when an event occurs in the environment and when the alert fires in our SIM. The reason this is important is because if there's a big lag time between those two times, then that's a big problem. Acceptable event to alert time is anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes. Depending on the log source, things like cloud and stuff like that can take a little bit longer to get into the SIM. But if it starts to go way up and we have hours elapsing between a threat actor doing something in our environment and the team being notified, that's a big problem. Log source coverage. Does our SIM tool consume all the security relevant logs? So do we have visibility into everything that we need to have visibility into? Or are there coverage gaps? This one is a challenge, and there's a lot of different ways to show these metrics, and it takes a lot of work. But it's absolutely important because we place so much emphasis on the SIM, because we rely on it so much, we need to ensure that it can see all the activity it needs to see. Quality investigation, that's our QA program. So are our people closing our case records properly? Are they following all the steps that they're supposed to follow? Are they checking all of the things that they're supposed to check? More importantly, are they coming to the correct verdict, or are they calling things false positive when they aren't? Are they calling it not malicious when it is? As well as identifying our most common analyst mistakes. This feeds into our training so that we can figure out how to be better. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about integrating vulnerability and exposure management. What are vulnerability and exposure management? Vulnerabilities are security vulnerabilities, or vulnerability management is a process by identifying and remediating security vulnerabilities. So we're talking CVEs, within the security parlance. So what we mean by that is, all right. What we mean by that is, as vulnerabilities in our systems, this is scanning for vulnerabilities. This is determining whether or not we have any in our environment, and then putting together a plan on how we're going to remediate. Again, we're going to follow a triage process there. Exposure management is a little different. So this is more holistic security risks. So we're talking not just vulnerabilities and CVEs, but we're talking misconfigurations, bad security configurations. So think pen test findings, things like that, and putting that into the process. Similar to alerts, we can triage vulnerabilities and exposures. So we can take a look at them. We can determine high, medium, low. We can then assign resources to them and do an investigation. What does this mean? What do we need to do about this? What teams need to be involved? How do we get this remediated? And then if it's critical, so if you have a CVSS 10, something like that on your external perimeter, you can treat it like an incident. You're still going to bring in different technical teams, and you're going to try to fix that as quickly as possible if you find some sort of major issue. And you can follow a very similar process as if it was a threat actor. So a very common thing that's starting to happen in the industry is integrating that vulnerability management and exposure management into the SOC using those same triage processes, those same incident response processes. You already have a team that is 24/7 doing this monitoring, doing these investigations, all these groups, etc. All right, so when an incident occurs and we need to respond, let's talk about how we can respond to an incident and how we can be successful. First and foremost, the thing you want to do is you want to appoint an incident commander to manage that incident. What do I mean by that? You need to have a single person through which the incident is managed, and a single team that's going to become the nexus point of that. This allows us to. This prevents us from stepping on all over each other. This prevents different teams from taking action independently and conflicting with each other, or making changes even that might overwrite the other folks. Next, once we've appointed our incident commander, we want to assemble our incident response team. So this is not just your SOC. This is going to also be your IT teams. Think network, platform, identity, platform owners, system owners, stuff like that. If someone breaches an app that was developed in-house, and the bad guys are exploiting some sort of misconfiguration in the application that your company built, well, you probably want that app development team to be involved in the incident response to be able to tell you more about it. Things like that. Also, disaster recovery, business continuity, and even your company's crisis management functions. They may be integrated into the response team directly, or you may need to figure you're going to stay in contact with them. We talked earlier about management by objectives. So setting objectives and then assigning tasks out to complete those objectives during a certain period of time. Typically, when you're the incident commander and you're setting your initial objectives, you want to look at your initial objective being contain the threat and reduce the impact as much as possible. Midterm, as you have contained the threat and are starting to get control of the situation, you want to focus on restoring your disrupted services, so bringing those systems back up and getting the company back up and running. And then long-term focus, fully remediating and preventing additional attacks. So this is where you want to understand how the attack occurred, and put in things in place to prevent you from getting attacked again in the same way. This is getting you not just back to good, but better than good. And then finally, situational awareness and documentation. Again, we talked about it. We have some mechanisms for that. We want to provide regular updates to our stakeholders, our senior leaders, our crisis management, even our customers want to know what's happening. And as the incident response team, we have to be able to disseminate that information to the people who need to know quickly. This also, just from the practitioner standpoint, Having effective processes for providing updates to stakeholders prevents the stakeholders from barging in and demanding the updates. If you give them a mechanism by which they're going to get updated and they feel like they're in the know, they will oftentimes leave you alone and let you do what you need to do. If you don't provide them updates and they don't feel like they have all the information that they need to know, oftentimes they will want to become personally involved in the incident response, which is generally not a good thing from a senior leadership perspective. We also want to document our incident actions. We need to look at it after the fact and figure out how to be better. There may also be some legal ramifications of this incident that law enforcement or there may be lawsuits or regulatory action afterwards. We need to be able to document everything that we did, everything that we discovered, and what we did about it, etc. And then finally, we want to collect and retain our forensics, or maybe a legal perspective, where we need to provide these forensics to others, but also this is where we do our analysis to make sure that we're fully remediated, we can prevent additional attacks. It's really important to understand how the incident occurred, how the threat actor got in, so that we can ensure that we apply better controls to the new environment. So, incident response lessons. I like to say incident response is a team sport, but it's not a spectator sport. Like we talked about before, we want to bring the right people in as quick as possible. So when we have an incident occur, or even a critical vulnerability or a critical exposure that we need to do something about, we want to pull the right teams in. So we want to get the teams that are going to help us remediate the problems and take whatever actions need to be taken. At the same time, and we want to get them in as quickly as possible. At the same time, we want to ensure that we don't open this up to everyone. We don't want this to become a response by committee. You don't want a working group during an incident. You want an incident commander and clear objectives and clear roles and responsibilities for everyone who's there. And anyone who doesn't need to know can be informed as they have a need to know, so potentially later. This is a tricky subject, and especially senior leaders can take poorly to being told that they don't have a need to know during an incident. And this is where we want to make sure that we have good executive buy-in and support, which is something I've talked about in my first webinar. If you have that good executive buy-in and support, then it's a little bit easier to say, hey, I appreciate the fact that you're excited about this incident or you're concerned about this incident. Here's how we're providing updates, but right now you don't have a need to know, and you need to focus on maintaining the incident. So like where in my company, the reason I am currently in Manila is so that we can cut the ribbon on a secure facility here in Manila, where we can lock our incident responders into a room and keep them separate from everyone else and maintain that need to know. And we have those facilities physically in office locations all over the world. So find the right people, put them into the secure room. They can speak openly and freely. At the same worry about having 150 and we don't have to worry about 50 people watching what we're doing. Another way to be successful with this is anticipating the needs and questions of the outside stakeholders. So understanding what senior leadership wants to know, understanding what the lines of business are going to want to know, and providing that information ahead of time. That said, I say it's not a spectator sport, but the after action review is where things can be open. After action review is where we're going to review what happened, we're going to talk about it, and that's where you want more perspectives. When the decisions need to be made, we want to simplify it and only have the right people in the room. But later, when we're looking at how do we improve our processes, we want as much input as possible. Another lesson learned here is it's much easier to work out these procedures, get people to understand what their roles are and what the expectations are, and things like that in an exercise ahead of time before an incident occurs than pulling them in and the first time they're exposed to any of this is during the incident. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. First, enabling recovery. Recovery involves restoring all our systems with functionality. So that's getting back to good or better than good if we can. In order to recover, we have to have a recovery environment. It has to be safe and available, which means the threat actor cannot be in that environment. They cannot have malware and tools deployed in that environment. They cannot have access to that environment, because whatever we recover, they're just going to back over again. We have to have adequate backups or templates to be able to recover into the recovery environment. So if we didn't do work ahead of time to ensure that we're backing up our critical systems, there's not a lot to recover. And then we need mitigations in place to prevent another attack. If we recover the environment exactly like it was, it has whatever vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, exposures allowed the threat actor to get in the first place. Those are still there. You have to fix those before you can bring that recovery environment up. So security teams do not run the show during recovery, but we support recovery by rapidly gaining an understanding of how the attack occurred so that we can, again, ensure that recovery environment is good, put defenses in place to protect that new recovery environment and ensure that it doesn't get attacked, and then monitor it after things are recovered to ensure that there are no follow-up attacks. So using exercises to prepare and improve, this is one of my favorite topics. I could give a 3-part webinar on this, but we're going to talk very briefly, just to ensure that everyone understands. You can find a lot of information about this out there. If you ever have any questions, feel free to hit me up on this topic. Again, this is one that's near and dear to my heart. Our exercises are designed to validate our capabilities, identify our gaps, and improve our procedures. What that means is we want to walk through our procedures as often as possible using scenario-based exercises. 2 primary types of exercises. There's a tabletop exercise, which is where written injects are used to drive a scenario and a discussion. So the inject will say, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. You'll allow all the teams to talk about what their procedures are. This is really good for fleshing out processes, validating processes, and also getting people used to what the processes are and the procedures are. On the other side of the coin, there's the functional exercises, which are more realistic. At the end of every exercise, there should be an after-action review, again, like we talked about, where we identify our improvements and try to be as good as possible. Awesome. All right. So at the end of exercises, you should conduct an after-action review. You want to identify gaps. The purpose of the exercise should never be, we did everything perfectly and we learned nothing. That's not what we want. We want to figure out how to be better next time. And so this is where you got to be brutally honest, not about individual performances, but about plans, policies, procedures, and making sure things work. Tabletops and functional exercises need to be conducted often. 1 a year is not enough. A lot of companies will do a tabletop. We do a tabletop. I will tell you that is not enough. We do at least 4 tabletops and 4 functional exercises yearly. Started a little bit to work with our APAC teams to give them a little more practice outside of US hours. Do it as often as you can support, because what you're going to get out of this is gold. And again, going back to the security is a team sport, or incident response is a team sport, but not a spectator sport. Setting those expectations in an exercise is how you want to do it. Continuous improvement program. So this is just where you bring all this together. Security isn't static, and world class is not a destination, it's a mindset, which means you have to have a program that's focused on constantly improving people, process, and technology. Continuously evaluate what you're doing and identifying gaps. So think back to the exercises we just talked about. Then all the inputs. So think about our exercises, think about those stats we talked about earlier. Think about what we're seeing in our QA program in terms of how the analysts are doing and how the team is doing, what kind of mistakes are being made. Work with your leadership to strengthen those areas of improvement. Don't brush them under the rug. You want to be open and honest about the gaps so that you can address them with training, with budget, with new tools, what have you. You also need to stay current with new threats and new technologies. Things are constantly changing. If you are not continuously assessing and improving your security program, it is going to very quickly become stale. In addition to doing after-action reviews on exercises, you should also do after-action reviews on real incidents for the same reason. We want to know where those gaps were. We want to know how to be better next time. We want to know how to improve defenses. This is often left to the end, like this one where we have to push through it. But again, continuous improvement program could be something that I could give a 3 sessions on. Hugely important. And if you harken back to our first talk class, this is very, very important to senior leadership. So parting thoughts: when organized correctly, the SOC is super exciting. It's a place where, you know, everything comes together, where threats are tracked and tackled quickly, and where we centrally manage the chaos. At this time, our triage model and our incident command system can be applied to organize that chaos, and it can be applied to more than just threat actors and hackers. It can also be applied to vulnerabilities and risks in general. Teams don't rise to the occasion, although their level of training. Our adequate preparation is going to win the day. So having that quality improvement program, having that continuous improvement program, and constantly training, exercising, and practicing is going to be absolutely critical to success as a SOC. And you know, the SOC should always be evolving and improving. It is the only way we're going to stop the adversaries, because they're evolving and improving, and oftentimes they're doing it faster than we can. So we have significant effort into it, especially when incidents are not occurring. Sure. So I did not do a great job of explaining this during the talk, but the big thing is we're continuously developing new alerting content within the system, right? So you're constantly trying to improve that content, expand your coverage, alert on new suspicious or malicious activity, etc. Part of that is a tuning process. Again, this is something that can be a very long conversation, but essentially as the SOC sees the alerting content occur, as well as some testing maybe being done to make sure that the content is working properly, you're going to try and tune the alerts down. So one of the things that we do is we look at the false positive rate, not only overall, but also on each individual alert. And if we start getting a lot of false positives for the same alert, that's an alert that is submitted for tuning. So how can we make the alert more accurate? How can we rule out the false positives or make the criteria different so that we don't get as many false positives, we only get the true positives? So great question. Oh man, I mean, take a look at OWASP top 10, take a look at the Verizon DBIR, and there are a few others out there that publish, you know, large trends in what's happening in terms of commonly exploited vulnerabilities, and things like that. I mean, what I see often is users are the number one. You know, the users being hacked, and credentials being stolen is generally one of the biggest ways, and the other is just common vulnerabilities, and it changes throughout the year depending on which vulnerabilities are, you know, new and out there. I would say from a systematic perspective, most organizations struggle with vulnerability management and so what you see in a lot of these high-profile breaches is known vulnerabilities that have been out there for a long time. You know, their CVSS score 8, 9, or 10 from a year ago, and they had something on the border that had vulnerability. The organization didn't have a way of detecting it. You know, that's where a lot of these big breaches are coming from. And then the other big one, attackers-wise, is the users themselves. How do we identify threats in our network? What are some ways? So there's a lot of different ways. We have security tools out there that will identify for malicious activity on endpoints. Think EDR. endpoint detection and response, which tells us if someone tries to download malware or something suspicious executes on the endpoint. We deploy EDR to servers as well. Typically, we want EDR coverage on servers to be as good as possible for that reason, because servers are usually where our most interesting data is. The other thing is looking at networking in general. So there are network defense and response tools out there, or network detection and response tools out there that will look at the network traffic flowing through and alert on certain things like exploit attempts, malicious payloads, command and control, or network traffic going to like known bad IP addresses and things like that. But another one is behavior-based network defense. So looking at trends in general. Hey, there's a lot of data suddenly flowing out to, cloudfront.net. Okay, well, that's a CDN. It's a content delivery network. It's usually to host websites, but so we should have some back and forth to it, but we should have more inbound than outbound from CloudFront. So that's a clue that maybe there's some data exfiltration going on. Another one is UEBA, so user behavior analytics. If a user starts accessing files they don't normally access, or logging at times they don't normally log in from, I should be firing UEBA right now because I am working in the Manila time zone, and so I have just suddenly changed from my baseline. That's another way we get detections. Lots of different ways, lots of very interesting ways, and it really depends on your organization and what tools that you have available. That is a great question. I love that question. So it's a constant challenge. There's more and more automation out there. We're starting to use AI, which is something we're going to talk about more in our next talk next month. We're starting to use AI more and more in security. I mean, we have been for a long time using machine learning and stuff like that to spot trends, but we're getting to the point now where we're allowing the AI to take some actions and make some decisions and do some things automated. I like to say start with your low-hanging fruit. Something that was taking up a lot of my analysts' time and was not netting a lot of stopped bad guys was phishing investigations. You have hundreds of phishing emails being flagged daily. Having a human perform the first level analysis on every single one is a huge time suck. When a lot of them, by the time the analyst has gotten to them, the controls. So, that was an area that was ripe for automation, and we have deployed a tool to do that. At the same time, you don't want to take the human out of the decision chain when it's important. So really, I like to use automation to surface information. Think about that enrichment we talked about earlier. To tell my analyst what's going on so they can make a decision. But ultimately, I want the human to push the button on things like containing production servers and stuff like that, cutting production servers off from the rest of the network. I don't really want automation to do that. I want a human to be able to do that. So using automation to either automate away the low resolution, low payoff, repetitive tasks, as well as very quickly bring information to the analyst to be able to make a decision very, very quickly and get to that escalation as quickly as possible. Please feel free to stay in touch. Looking forward to the next session where we're gonna talk more about some of the more like emerging technology and things like that, and how this all kind of comes together to round out a cyber defense program. But thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for your wonderful questions, and I'm looking forward to the next one.